Hello, everybody. This is Gerald Celente, and it's Wednesday, June 7th, 2023. And once again, on these Wednesdays, we're so honored to have with us a man of men, someone who really knows the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and fights for the freedom of the American people and the people around the world that have lost their freedom. And Judge, thanks for being here today, because your new article is that state secrets undermine due process. We're talking about freedom, no freedom of speech, and no Constitution. And it seems like week after week when we meet, it's always another level of how we become not the United States of America, but the USSA, the United Soviet States of America. And your article here, that state secrets undermine due process, really exemplifies that.
Well, it's hard to believe, and Gerald, always a pleasure to be on with you, my dear friend. It's hard to believe that in a courtroom of the United States of America, the prosecutor has a buzzer on his table, and if he suspects that the defense lawyer is going to say something that's a secret, he gets to press the buzzer, silence his adversary. The public can't hear what's going on, and the judge admonishes defense counsel not to say what he was about to say. Now, this is a procedure that was used in the old Soviet Union when the Soviets wanted to frustrate a criminal defense lawyer, but this is happening. Now, it's Guantanamo Bay, but it's a federal courtroom under federal law with a federal judge, with a federal prosecutor, with a military defense counsel being stifled. And what was the military defense counsel talking about? Where and how my client was tortured and why he was locked up for 20 years before they even brought charges against him. And this is what he was prevented and stifled from saying. My point is not that the defendant is a good person, but that if this can happen in an American courtroom to this guy, we should all know about it and be aware of it, because it is just one more baby step of the government crushing liberty, the liberty of the press to know what's going on, the First Amendment, the liberty of the defendant to have due process rights, a fair proceeding against him, and the liberty of the defendant to have his Sixth Amendment rights, which is effective assistance of counsel. If the prosecutor can silence the defense lawyer, then the defendant does not have effective assistance of counsel, and that right has been violated. Does the government care? No. Under what procedure is this happening? The Lindsey Graham, George Bush military tribunal procedure that they wrote and rewrote 5 times from 2001 to 2006, still going on in Gitmo.
You know, 2 things. The guy that they're prosecuting in that's been locked up for over 20 years in Guantanamo Bay, some 20 years, he's allegedly, blew up a hotel or something in
Correct.
Indonesia?
Correct.
What the hell do we care what happened in Indonesia?
Exactly. And they had no evidence against him until they tortured him for 4 years. So the issue is, they can't use the evidence against him. Even these rules, thanks to the Supreme Court, prohibit using evidence obtained under torture. So what are we doing here, Your Honor? That is basically the argument. So the government, because there's 3 of them, goes to the weakest link of the 3 and says, we'll give you a good deal if you testify against the other 2. The third tells the government to go take a hike. So now they don't know what to do. So what do? They silence defense counsel when he talks about it. You and I are revealing more to the public, people watching us now, about this than defense counsel was permitted to reveal in this courtroom. So in the courtroom, there's a glass wall. The press is on the other side of the glass wall from the judge and the defendant and the prosecutor and defense counsel. And the PA system has a 40 second delay. So when the buzzer goes off, obviously the press doesn't get to hear what happened. The press doesn't get to hear anything because the government is terrified of making an admission that it tortured people.
I have one of those buzzers, by the way. You ready? Here it is.
Bullshit. Bullshit. That is bullshit. Bullshit.
That's the government. Bullshit. You're right here. You mentioned about how the state secret thing became an issue when a plane crashed in the 1940s, and the people wanted to know what, the manufacturer of the plane that killed the people. And they said they wouldn't reveal it because they said it was a state secret.
Turned out there was no secret at all. All the feds wanted to do was to protect, here we go, Dwight D. Eisenhower warned us, to protect the military contractor from being sued. Everybody on the plane was a male. They all died. So these are our wives and mothers wanted to sue the manufacturer of the plane for the plane crash, and the government wouldn't tell them who the manufacturer was. 30 years later, when everybody involved in the case was dead, actually 50 years later, the New York Times, sometimes they do good things, filed a Freedom of Information Act request to find out what the state secrets were that couldn't be revealed. There were none.
There were none.
What they wanted to protect was government embarrassment and the identification of the government contractor, and it was too late to sue him.
Yeah. This is terrible what's going on. The American way, crushing liberty. I think that's what's happened. And they've crushed it in every different way. And it's just getting worse and worse by the day. The damage, by the way, that this COVID war has done is incalculable.
Yes.
Not only economically, but mentally, spiritually, physically, all the data is there. Crime rates skyrocketing. I mean, there was never this thing where, stores closing down because of high crime rates before this happened. Now you're seeing the drug overdose numbers, the suicide rates, the obesity rates, on and on. Now another study came out because they had masks on little kids. Now the kids are having trouble talking as they're growing up because they weren't able to speak freely as kids. I mean, it's the damage that's been done. But I'm mentioning this because, again, our liberty and freedom was robbed from us from politicians who made up laws based on political science, not real science.
Well, they made up their own rules. No legislature, not the New York legislature, not the New Jersey legislature, not the U.S. Congress, no legislature ordered any lockdown whatsoever. These were all diktats ordered by, to some extent, Trump, but for the most part by the governors of the states. And we all, not you and I, but 90% of the public caved like a nation of sheep.
Yep.
And now that, as you pointed out, is bearing fruit. It has resulted in lack of mature intellectual, cultural development on the part of children, and for some reason, the crime rate has spiked. You go to a drugstore in New York City, go to a Walgreens or something like that, and try and buy a toothbrush. You can't grab the toothbrush. Everything in that drugstore is behind a plate glass. You got to get the clerk to come and open up the door so you can see which toothbrush you want. It's the same for anything: toothbrush, toothpaste, soap, whatever you're going to buy there, because for some reason, the shoplifting is rampant in New York post-COVID.
Well, it's all over. It's going again. As I said, when it happened, when people lose everything and have nothing left to lose, they lose it, and they've lost it. Judge, on another level of atrocities, a couple of days ago, a dam and hydroelectric plant was blown up in Ukraine. And these are the headlines from Associated Press. Ukraine accuses Russia of destroying major dam near Kherson, warns of ecological disaster. CNN. Destruction of critical dam is ecocide. Zelensky aide says, New York Times, Ukraine blamed Russia for destroying the barrier, critical dam destroyed on front line in southern Ukraine. They all blame Russia. Every headline in America blames Russia. This is a headline from TASS. I don't know how to pronounce this properly. You could tell me if I'm in the right way. Kakhovka, HPP continues to collapse. Water is discharged uncontrollably. Ukraine forces shelled the Kakhovka HPP in the early morning hours on Tuesday. Ukrainian forces, that's TASS, the Russian news agency, saying. Sputnik, power plant destruction deliberate sabotage by Ukraine, Kremlin. So Russia says one thing, and America only says another thing. You're not allowed, if Zelensky's said that Russia did it, then Russia did it. Why would they blow up their own plant that they had troops there, Russian troops,